And welcome, KT. How's it going?
It's going good. How about yourself?
It is a balmy, sweaty, and freezy day here in Okinawa.
Well,
Yeah.
that's lovely.
Woke up freezing and now I'm sweating. So it's awesome. It's the way it goes around here. I've already had to take my cat out for a walk. Yes, I do walk my cat. It's not like walking a dog. It's literally just going downstairs and he sits outside and watches people and cars go by and then tries to chew on some plant that's poisonous so he can throw up. Cats are sadists and they like to throw up. So that was my morning. Messaged my wife. She's streaming on her things and saw some chats going on and made some off the cuff comments on Twitter and then hit you up. That's my day.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So you were actually very close to an acquaintance of ours, and I'm wondering if you've ran into the Leland Tanner in the wild.
I haven't, although I did find out and I did message him about this. Turns out that my brother and him used to be in the same ward. My brother recently moved to Utah and he's moved to even when he was still in the Phoenix area, he was jumping around to a bunch of different places. But anyways, for a while he was in Leland Tanner's ward and he said that they either he was the ministering brother to Leland or Leland was a ministering brother to him. I forget which, but anyways, so I was just like, that's a random thing. So there is a connection there, but I haven't met him in person. We've talked a couple of times, but that's about the extent of it at the moment. I'd like to talk to him more for sure, but that's the extent of it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm just out here. I think the closest Twitter saint I am to is John Locke and Peregrine. So
okay,
and Mrs. Peregrine.
Okay.
In fact, if it wasn't for the inflation sucking all my paycheck into food and gasoline, I had the idea of actually flying down to Perth and hanging out with them for a day or whatever. I thought that'd be kind of cool. Always want to go to Australia, but yeah, it'd be cool to be back in the States to hang out with the saints and people I've been interacting with. So, hey, and possibly get stationed next to somebody. So that'd be a fun one. See how that goes.
Do you know how long you expect to be stationed in Okinawa? Like what the remainder of your time there would be?
Oh, definitely. My time is up sometime this summer. So for personal reasons, I'm not going to explain the actual date, but there is an actual date. And like a delicious cake in the oven, you got to pull it out before it's burned. And I'm being pulled out and placed back to the States is what the common consensus amongst the personnelist folk can tell me. So,
okay.
And to be honest, since I've been overseas since 2017, and I last saw my family 2019. Only interacted online, and then it's just been a mess. So that, and then just the way COVID has kind of like altered the world, I'm just kind of tired of being over here. I've got a few more years left in my military career. I'm trying to do 20, so I want to do it all over here, and I can't. They have a policy. It's like 8 years max overseas in a certain location. So like 8 years in the Pacific region. So I would have to move somewhere. And the way the stars aligned, I'm moving back to the US. Where anyone's guess is good. So
that makes sense. My wife's cousin and her husband live in California right now. He's in the Navy. They're being restationed this summer as well. He's going to be deployed overseas for some amount of time. I don't know how long it's actually going to end up being, but anyway, so we were just actually, because we spent New Year's with them, so we were just talking to them about that 2 days ago. So a day and a half ago. So
yeah, for the Navy cats, the joke is PCS is just moving your storage unit. Because if you're on a boat, if you get assigned a boat, you're doing deployments 8 months to I think the longest on record's like post World War II has been like 15 months. I'm not somewhere ridiculous. Like they were having real big issues of like sailors just trying to jump off ship and kill themselves. It was getting pretty bad because the deployment tempo. So it's hard. I feel for and pray for your brother-in-law. It's a hard job. But yeah, that is as a it's kind of scary though. The anxiety of like having to basically start life again in the US, the costs, like it's not even just the financial stuff that obviously it's going to cost money. They say it's around $5,000 to $10,000 every time a service member moves, which is why they like to keep you in a certain place. The idea is you have time to build your savings up to spend it all onto moving again. So there's been calls for what we would call homesteading to basically allow you to stay in place and say, hey, there's not a strategic reason to move me, keep me here because I'm tired. And in fact, in the States, it's kind of a joke. People be stationed at a base and they've been there like 4 or 5 years. They get married and they're like, hey, honey, let's buy a house. And then they go through the whole process. They buy a house and then it's like, congratulations on your orders to Europe. And so now they become, real estate moguls and having to decide, do I want to sell this house? What do I want to do? And do I want to rent it out? And then do I want to do that? Or do I want to give a company? And then how much does that require? All that. So it's real hard in military families. And you throw in animals. Cats are expensive. Dogs are expensive. Hopefully, I haven't followed it up. There was a bill that was supposed to give service members a entitlement to help ease the burden of cost of moving animals. So I don't want to sound like a millennial, which I am, but these cats are like my children at this point, and it would suck to have to give them up. So the expectation of it's going to cost some money, and then there's some other issues. The veterinarian told me that she said in pretty good English, avoid Alaska, England, and Guam, because they require, like, if I were to go to either of those 3 places, I would have to start the paperwork now. And I wouldn't find out if I got any of those 3 places until later this year. So it's like, I need that. And then it's like all these shots and then like blood work now, and then like blood work a few days out. Like it's just, she's like, just don't. So
that makes sense. There's a lot of requirements for importing animals, moving them places. So my wife is from the Philippines and she has a poodle over there, but she had to leave behind. The process was way too much and too expensive for us to be able to bring it with her. But she's got a good family friend that it's staying with, so the dog's fine. But she misses him, which is sad. So
yeah, and then like I know to go to, like, let's pretend we're moving to the UK. They do not allow commercial flights with animals. So you have to fly through a shipper who will put the animal on an approved 747 or whatever the aircraft is for shipping. And so it goes a different route. And that at minimum per pet is like $2,000 to $5,000, depending on the animal, guaranteed.
Yeah. I don't know who has that kind of money.
I think the record I've heard of is $22,000. This couple moved to Guam and they had two big dogs. I can't remember, German Shepherds, Rottweilers or something. Maybe German Pinschers. I'm not sure. Dobermans, I think. Dobermans? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, they paid that out of pocket. I'm like, that's a car that came with like 10% APR. Like dogs. That's a huge investment. So
yep. But if you love your dog, I guess, what do you do? So, but I've personally, I don't have a dog right now, or a pet right now, so I can't fully relate to that, like having that attachment. But my brother has 3 and he's very attached to him, almost to the point that he also has 3 kids, but he's also like, he loves them like kids. And I try to understand that, but I don't fully, just because I've never felt that. Like pets growing up, I was one of those people that like, I love my dog. I loved him, but he was still a dog at the end of the day. So if I was asked to pay that kind of money, I would have been like, nah, sorry, dog. We're finding a new home for you. Like
Sorry,
that's
homie.
just that's what would have happened. And it's
The way
not
it
that I'm
goes.
trying to be heartless, but I don't know. I don't have that attachment like that. I just think, yeah, no dog's worth it. So, but
Yeah, it's different that way. Some people just the way it's the way you view the animal and your
mhm,
relationship to them. My family's always had animals, so I've not had any. I'm more inclined to always have an animal, and
mhm.
it would be kind of cool. I have this idea of having like a little ranch and get some like livestock and a livestock guardian dog. There's a lot of really cool ones. You hear about that dog? He's being memed right now. His name is Casper, livestock guardian dog. He's a Great Pyrenees, big old boy, and he made the local news because he decimated 8 coyotes that were trying to eat the livestock. He went out and killed
Wow.
8 in one go.
Wow.
Obviously, he was like in intensive care at the vet. And the community pulled together to pay for him. And the dude was kind of really beaten up, and he's probably got a few like several months, if not a year of recovery. But man, that is wild. Like
Mhm,
to have seen that would have been crazy. This
mhm.
one dog going ham on coyotes. So
Yeah, and that's one of the really admirable things about dogs is the amount of loyalty that they have, that you can train them for something. And man, that's it's a remarkable. Dogs are really cool in that regard.
Japan is famous for the what's his name, the Kyoto station. I'm gonna look this up. I have internet right here. Famous Tokyo dog waiting. Hachiko. He was a Akita Japanese, and he was remembered for the loyalty of his owner Hide Saburo Ueno, who he continued to wait for 9 years following his owner's untimely death. And so outside the train station, where the dog waited for 8 years, they erected a bronze statue of the dog waiting. And I think they actually added his owner. They went and made his owner, and so they're reunited. So,
Oh, that's
but
really cool.
yeah, so the loyalty that some animals have is incredible, which a lot of humans could learn from.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Especially in today's world, it seems like loyalty is a forgotten virtue because, man, the moment someone has an opportunity to throw someone else under the bus, to be your best friend, it seems like a lot of people are willing to do it. You know, if they get some kind of gain out of it, or if they're worried that they're going to have retribution from society at large because, you know, that person's been canceled via cancel culture, you know. And so it's like either you stab them in the back, you're no longer friends with them, or you get swept into the cancel culture too, and you don't want to deal with that. And so, anyways, it's very sad the way that people have lost not just that virtue, but a lot of virtues. Not that I want to be on a soapbox because I'm not a perfect person by any means,
yeah.
but you know.
No, I think everyone in society has a right to have commentary on society. You're a part of the productive means. You're a part of the mechanisms and gears which it turns. So you have a say in the way it goes. Anybody that says you don't is a authoritarian, and they should be distrusted and imprisoned if necessary, because that's how you get terrible regimes like Mao Zedong or Communist Chinese Party, or Hitler. You know, like, let's go back in time. Genghis Khan had a whole bunch of yes men behind him. Oh yeah, let's go slaughter everybody. And you have Count Dracul, who is literally putting people's heads on pitchforks, spears and pikes. Yes men make terrible people happen. They don't happen without it. And so I think the chivalry is an important aspect in society. And I think that's one of the things I was kind of excited for this conversation, is your background as a actual religious major, and you're not pretentious. So that was even more exciting. Um, I I've heard several people joke about religious majors and the comments. I'm sure you're aware of more of those jokes than I am, but it's hard to have a perspective nowadays that is not fully dogmatic with personal biases and what you're looking at. So
Yep, that's definitely true. And I appreciate you saying that I'm not pretentious. I try to not be, to be clear. But I think it's almost part of the game in general, though, for religious scholars, from what I've observed. Like they have a sense of arrogance, and I know better, and I have an elite perspective on the world and stuff. And so going into this degree, and I got my bachelor's in religion, and I'm finishing up my master's right now, and I've already accepted that, once I get in and figure out exactly what I'm going to do, because I don't know, I only went into this degree program because the Lord told me to, and I have some ideas on where things might go, but I don't know. So I've already accepted, though, I'm never going to be part of the in crowd, which is not something I want anyways, because honestly, the people in the in crowd of religious scholarship, especially within the church, don't seem to be people that I want to be affiliated with. They I don't know how to say it properly, but most of them seem to be anti. That's the only way I know how to put it. Like they say that they're members of the church. They say that they still believe, but the stuff that they produce and what they say about the church, to me, is not congruent with somebody who actually believes and thinks that the teachings of the church are good. And I do believe that. And so I don't want to be associated with those people anyways. But
I think that more has to do, and this is my soapbox. I'm an outsider. I like to call myself a scientist. There's some people who want to gatekeep and say, "Oh, if you're not connected to actual scientists, blah 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 blah." If you disregard the ignorance of the gatekeepers and stuff, I feel like I've conducted scientific stuff. I have a perspective. I'm an outsider, and I basically am a wallflower to these different communities as an interdisciplinary scientist. And there's so much eternalized dogma that is passed off as professional pride that it's disgusting, because it's preventing actual science from being conducted, because their internalized bias will prevent them from being self-aware and going, oh, maybe I should record that I do have a bias. Like, you look at all these scientific papers, and one of the requirements for publishing a paper is you have to disclose any biases, and people aren't doing that. And there's many cases of people getting called out. Like, what do you mean your uncle works at this company and you guys were doing research? That is a bias. And then you have people who are just so unself-aware of their biases and just fully drinking the cup of dogma. And then on the flip side, you also have this group of people who know they're self-aware of their dogma, and they feel that that is what should be preached, and that's all they preach. They're a one trick pony, and that's all they want to talk about. Like these professionals who are just like, X, Y, and Z is all that matters, and that's all I'm ever going to talk about. And I don't care what you think. And if you disregard me, you are a bigot, or you have hatred, or you're part of this group that I'm talking about. And you can't have any thought where you can't have any progressive thought. It's no better than when the Catholics were controlling science. You can't have a conversation if you prevent people from asking questions. And so,
yeah. There's definitely a balance that has to be struck there. And it's difficult because, you have, like you said, there's extremes on both sides. It's like, and I don't mind talking about this if you don't too, but earlier today, I had messaged you and a couple of other people about research proposal idea that I had that I was going to submit to an organization that has a conference for graduate students next year. And my thought process and what I was writing about was how a lot of people seem to disregard the spiritual implications of research that they do, and that, you know, they can write a paper on how this needs to change or this needs to be done, and the church did this and it was bad, and they don't look at or try to frame it in a way that helps people in the faith. So it's just like they I don't know how to say this very well, but like they had a shotgun, they shot it out, there's just a flurry of stuff out there, and now the collateral damage is what it is. If you get hit with it and, you know, it wasn't their intention that someone leaves the church because they found out all this stuff and they're shocked and they don't understand it and it wasn't presented in a way that gives context or whatever, then it is what it is. That's definitely not okay. And on the flip side, you have people who present research from a way that's like, I don't know how to say this either, but like thoroughly, so they're so apologetic, I guess, that they're clearly disregarding evidence, information out there that's maybe that doesn't support their cause, you know. So you can have kind of both sides where someone's so adamant about defending the church, they're ignoring things that are there. But on the other side, you're just providing any and all evidence, and you're just pushing it out there. And, you know, whether or not people lose their testimony over it, it's whatever. And to me, that's not okay, you know, with that last example, because you have, I believe, a responsibility as a religious scholar to present work in a way that you're not mitigating truth, you're not trying to hide anything, but at the same time that you at least have an awareness that this is connected to someone's spiritual identity. And so if you aren't careful with how you present things, then you can significantly damage somebody in their worldview and how they look at and create an identity crisis. So I just think a lot of times scholars aren't being careful in that regard, especially nowadays. It just seems like social justice and all of these different things that people push in research is the be all of everything. And so the implications of what it does to the church as a whole, or the values that the church has held for hundreds of years, like doesn't matter to them. And that's a problem. So if I might make sense, because sometimes I'm worried that I don't, because I just like babble. But
and if you're the person in the middle, you're hated by both.
Yeah.
Like
quite
hey
literally.
Guys,
yes.
You're being biased. No, we're not. Like, shut up, get out of here. You're the one getting attacked because you're pointing out the obvious. It's very hard to be self-aware, and it's a skill that has to be learned and it has to be present. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but one of the best books I've read, caveat, not the best book I read, but one of the best books I read where an author was self-aware throughout and was clearly stating their biases was Richard Bushman's Joseph Smith Rough-Stone Rolling. Because throughout he was self-aware, and he was also aware enough to address the person he was using as a reference, where they're coming from, what paradigm are they viewing their research through. And every time he was coming to something that would be controversial in how he said it, he always framed, I'm an active member of the church. This is my self-aware bias. I feel inclined to look at things, and he doesn't go just always towards, you know, the church is right. The church is right. He does. There are some points where he says, there are some things I don't know. This is an interesting aspect. So I don't know if you've read that book and would have that same agreement.
I haven't read it. So I've heard some things recently that make me want to read it, just so that I have an understanding of what he said, because there seems to be some people who really hate him and the fact that he wrote that book, and say that whether or not he claims to be an active member of the church because of some of the things that he put out there, it was basically an it was like anti-literature, like just feeding stuff so that people could use it against the church, kind of a thing. And I don't know that that's accurate, because I haven't read it, so I don't know. But and the fact that you find it to be now, when, just so that I make sure I understand too, did you like the book? Did you feel like he did a good job, or did you feel you're just saying that you admire him for highlighting his biases and acknowledging them in the book?
I actually did a monologue thought for Spiritual Danger Close on this topic. I did like a mini book review.
Okay,
If you give me a second, I can actually pull up what I said, some highlights from it that I think.
okay, cool.
Give me a second, Rough Stolen. Yeah, I published this open in browser, please. Published this May 8th, 2021. I'm not entirely sure what episode it is for the blog podcast. So like, not to digress from the conversation, but Richard Bushman is a governor of Morris Professor Emeritus History at Columbia University in 2021. From 1955 to 1961, he earned a BA, AMA, and a PhD from Harvard and Columbia University. Notes he has authored various publications of American history, and his foremost recognized works. In his testimony to Faithful Answers of an Informed Response to Latter-day Saints, he explained, that's the FAIR LDS, as a fifth generation member of the church during a semester in graduate school, was asked by a colleague why he's still a member of a church having such a high education. Quote, not stopping to think, I told him I remained a Mormon because I followed my religion and I became the kind of man I want to be, end quote. So he's very prestigious, graduated magna cum laude, which is like very top of his class, does stuff. And then he started, while he may be biased in writing about his religion due to his faith, this hasn't hindered him from academically in 66 years in his profession. A fellow peer, Turner, in 2009 said in the review that Bushman's latest work is brilliant. Further, Bushman's peers, quote, most outside of the LDS faith feel themselves standing on somewhat shaky ground when discussing LDS teachings, end quote. And then maintains professionalism and strives for academically sound framework in the pursuit of telling a story on a subject. And then I think what I got to from Bushman's work is, as Bushman points out, that every day Joseph Smith worked to build what he called the kingdom of God on earth, the new Zion in America. What I got from Rough Stone Rolling is a greater, deeper understanding of who Joseph Smith was. I feel Bushman accomplished is telling of a poignant story about the simplest paradigm in viewing Joseph Smith. The man thought he was a prophet, so we should also examine the world through his eyes as such. Responding to the statement about being trusted with power granted to a leader with devout followers, Joseph said, quote, I am only a man in the world to whom it would be safe to trust with it. Remember, I am a prophet, end quote. And so I think Bushman's biggest paradigm he wrote that book through was Joseph Smith said he was a prophet. So let's examine it through that perspective. But he also addresses all these main claims. And then people will use that and do that. And there's a whole bunch of criticisms, but I feel like if I had control of the gospel library, it would be in there. It gives you both sides. It gives those answers to a lot of things members of the church have very little understanding of. Like Joseph Smith's family was into 1800 magic practice, and people don't know that. Like that's just, they believed in imps and fairies and, divining of spirits and stuff. Like that was very prevalent in his viewership, or not his viewership, his not paradigm, like it was just a part of the lifestyle. But it wasn't just particular to Joseph's family. It was like the Smiths weren't the only ones doing it. It was like culturally that was the norm, that was kind of popular. So like it really helps broaden your idea. I know at the end of it, I was really kind of doubting Joseph Smith in the way. And then I came to realize, and what I told my mission prep class was this: Joseph Smith had every single opportunity to deny he was a prophet and to denounce the church. From the deaths of his children in the middle of the night, to being tarred and feathered, to beaten, to being tried and possibly, executed several times, to actually being in the place where he was martyred. He had every single opportunity to open the window and say, sorry, guys, I made it all up. But the morning of his martyr, he was literally preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ restored. He believed he was a prophet. He believed he was restoring the gospel of Jesus Christ. Say what you will about his foibles. Everyone has them, right? But the man genuinely thought he was a prophet of God. He was leading, and then we can look at the fruits of that. And I feel like that's what I got from Rough Stone Rolling, was I got that perspective, because you get to see the portrayal of Joseph Smith through different lens.
That makes sense. So I watched recently, Midnight Mormons had a podcast with Hannah Stoddard, and she addresses Bushman and the book a little bit. It wasn't the focus of what they were talking about, but at least from what I recall, but I know that she talked about it. She said, and so this is something that I feel like I have to do a lot of research on, like, especially because of my major, individual research on myself, looking at any original or as close to original sources as I can, because she said from everything that she's looked at, the stuff about his family being into folk magic and fairies and stuff is actually a lie. And that if you look at the sources of where those come from, it's nobody who has any legitimacy, I guess is how she would probably say. I can't put words in her mouth, but so and that was the first time when she brought it up on the podcast, because I haven't read the book. That is the first time that I ever heard that. I had heard before, Joseph Smith doing things, I don't know what you would call them, but maybe it's considered magic still, but or superstitious stuff with divining rods and in treasure hunting and stuff, and so and using seer stones to look for treasure. Like I've heard that many times before, but I hadn't heard anything specifically about the stuff that she had brought up and that you just brought up. So I feel like I need to do more research before I can even say anything on it, because I have no idea. But
that's an interesting thing too, because it's very easy to fabricate stories and to draw incorrect conclusions. That's why I appreciate Bushman's work, because he does include his references. He's not like hiding it behind a magician's curtain, like, oh, you got to find it yourself. The most of the book is like a quarter of the book is his references, and it's page and page and page and page and page and page.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody I'm gonna have to read. That I'm gonna have to read that book. I'm gonna have to look at his sources for sure, especially because at the end of that podcast, she bore a testimony about Joseph Smith, and specifically Joseph Smith Sr., because according to her, again, in that book, she says that book does a lot of harm to Joseph Smith Sr. and who he is as a person, and it seems to take away from his character. And she says that the way he's portrayed is completely inaccurate. And after hearing that, though, I felt very strongly that I needed to do a thesis on Joseph Smith, because this coming summer I'll be starting my thesis for my master's program. And I've been debating. I've had a few ideas about subjects that I wanted to do, but I've been unsure about if that's the topic I wanted to proceed with. And then I listened to her, and all of a sudden I felt like, you know what, I know it's been done 100 times and it's not exactly original in any way, but I need to look into the character of Joseph Smith and really look at who he was as a person and what you can see from what historical documents say about him. It just felt very, very important to me. So that's what I'm doing. But anyways, I brought it up. So yeah, I'll definitely have to look at that book, because those kinds of things that he cites I would want to look at, because I want to understand Joseph Smith as a full and complete person as best as I can. And personally, I'm not, and maybe this is arrogant of me, but I'm not afraid of looking into things, into accusations with him. I have read so much stuff of anti-arguments and stuff against the church, and while they have caused me to have questions, maybe slight doubts, maybe like the first time I read it, and I haven't done any research yet into what the counter argument would be, or what is actually the context of what some anti-person is talking about. But eventually at the end of the day, I come back and I'm like, yeah, okay, that changes nothing. I still believe like this is still true. And I know that whatever argument they made is either something that is completely taken out of context and incorrect, and it's a person trying to attack the church and trying to be deceitful, or it's something that when I look at it in the scope of things isn't that big of a deal. And if I have to put it on a shelf and say, I don't understand that, but anyways, I haven't come across anything yet that has really shaken my testimony. And so when it comes to doing like a thesis on Joseph Smith, I'm not afraid to look at him as a full person, as a complete person, and make sure that I understand him. Because I really do believe at the end of the day that the result that I'm going to have, and this would be my bias, is that I will come back and see a better and fuller picture that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. I really believe that that's what's going to happen. So anyways, it doesn't scare me. So looking at his book and other people's books and the references they have, and being able to verify who they say said what, would be extremely beneficial to me. But the one other thing real quick, because I have this like in the back of my head and I better say it before I forget. The one thing that I find really interesting though, and I'm not saying anything about Bushman or you or anything in saying this, the fact that you said you read that book and when you finished the book, you had a moment of doubt, I found to be an interesting statement, only because, at least from Hannah Stoddard, when she was talking about that book, she was discussing just the number of people, members of the church who read that book and went away thinking, I don't know that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God, or that the church is true. And it's, to me, I find that fascinating because it's like, I'm not saying anything about him because I don't know. I haven't read the book. I don't know. But the saying, by their fruits you shall know them. And if his work is consistently leading people away from the church, then there might be something there. Maybe he presented something in a way that I don't know. This is just me speaking stuff.
It's also,
but
I would say the problem with his work is, like, in a academic sense, if a student submitted this, the academic advisor would slap them with it. It is a massive book. It's almost 700 pages with the references included. There's so much information, and as you're reading, you're having to process. That would be something interesting to study, to look at members of the church who've read the book and to see how it's affected their faith. That would be a simple qualitative mixed method research you could do. While you were telling me, I was flipping through. I have another book I'm trying to finish about Brigham Young. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm going to read books about the presidents of the church from non-members, or, from a more academic method. And I looked through John. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a more secular view. Bushman is religious in his presentation, but it's very secular. So I feel like that's maybe why. It's kind of like a comedian thinks a joke will tell really well, and it's not meant to be offensive, but everyone finds it offensive. Mm-hmm. That could be one of those things to study, and that's why I think research is exciting. Mm-hmm. The book on Brigham Young is called, by John G. Turner. It's called Brigham Young, Pioneer Prophet. And I flipped to the back to see if he calls out folkism. I'm going to have to study that more. I haven't heard anything about that, but I'll look into it. I always find that spirituality side of folk magic always interesting. It's still prevalent in America today.
And just to be clear too, everything that I'm saying right now, because I've literally, and Hannah Stoddard are the only two people that I've heard much of this on at all. So I'm saying what she said. I do not know, she's claiming that it has led people away from the church. Maybe that's not really the case, and she's exaggerating or whatever, I don't know. Yeah. So I can't say that is, so anyways, but I just wanted to be clear about that too.
Yeah, very clear.
Yeah.
I'm listening to a podcast, Joe Rogan's GRE with John Reeves. It says most recent, number 1918. And if you guys don't like Joe Rogan who are listening, I'm sorry. I enjoy Joe Rogan. Anyway, John Reeves is this Alaskan gold tycoon who owns the greatest amount of land in Alaska, a ridiculous swath of it. in the pursuit of locating gold, he starts to find bones of Pleistocene animals, mammoths, short-faced bears, American lions, just horses. On his Instagram, you can actually see where he believes is Pleistocene seeds and mushroom spores sprouting because the permafrost is melting, where they're finding these washout in bones. And he's not really been quiet, and that's kind of an issue. So he was going on Joe Rogan to explain this, and there's a National Geographic documentary about this boneyard, which kind of spurred him going on to Joe Rogan. And so he started telling about this. The academics that were involved, such as the Alaska University of History and something else, were they weren't really interested, and nobody really cared. And everyone kept telling him, the paleontologists that he would interact with, are saying those animals didn't live up there. And to not quote the bad word, but John Reeves said, but they for sure died up here. Right. I am saying that is my faith. I have had spiritual witnesses. I have seen them. It doesn't matter what your paradigm is. This is my perspective. This is my self dogma. I feel these things to be self-implying. It doesn't matter, how these things play. It's how I see them. And I have these bones, these spiritual witnesses. Terrible metaphor. I'm sorry, on the cuff. But you can't deny that I have these bones. You can't tell me that these animals didn't live here when I have their bones. Teleportation, like, what is your alternate theory to how these got all the way up here? And there's so many of them. He said they were building a 500,000 or 50,000 square feet warehouse to store all these bones. They stopped counting because there's no point in counting anymore. All he counts are basically the complete collections. And then he was just kind of like hypothesizing that these are the big bones. If you were to go with a fine tooth comb, you'd probably find it. And this is interesting because of, anyway, I digress, but
did he say about, like, does he have an estimate on the timeline of when he thinks those animals lived there?
They did carbon dating. For people who don't know what carbon dating is, it's basically you take something that was organic matter and you burn it, and then you test to see the isotopes, and certain isotopes give off and decay, so they go away, and you can measure that time of decay and you get an approximation. I don't know what the current data is of like how many years, but he's saying their carbon dating is putting some of the bones between 20,000 and 6,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago. So it falls in right with the Younger Dryas impact theory and ice shelf and stuff, but we're kind of digressing into Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson territory here. But
so 4,000 years ago puts it, like, for example, anytime I hear
more
horses,
than that. Yeah.
Anytime I hear horses in America, my ears perk up with, wait,
Yeah.
Book of Mormon, so does it falls in line then with potentially when Nephites were here, right? And when they're reporting on.
Yeah, I need to listen to the dates that he was getting again. That's kind of like one of those episodes. He's just an interesting character himself. And then his story of what he's come across is just so interesting. I'm going to listen to it again, but
I that makes me want to listen to it too. So.
And it's just so fascinating. While we're on the subject, I have a theory, and it's just a theory. Theories can be false or whatever. I think that the what do we call them? The Book of Jacob, the folks with the brother of Jared, the Jaredites.
Jaredites, yeah.
Jaredites, yeah. I have a feeling the Jaredites, when they came to America, they came across animals that survived the Younger Dryas that were still there. But because of natural selection, were slowly being pushed out of the ecosystem because it was harder for them to forage and find food, and other animals just basically outcompeted them with resources, and predators just destroyed them. but there's just a lot of interesting animals we just don't know what they are, and that's just my little fanciful drawing. And some people are like, oh, this guy is absolutely crazy, but it's whatever, baby. I don't care. I just think that would be hilarious, the Jaredites, and then talking about how large they were, and that kind of thing. So what I get out of it is my biggest soapbox, anyone who listened to my podcast long enough or know me long enough, is anytime humanity says something can't be this way, irony turns out actually it is.
Yeah.
Anytime we are profound, I had something beautiful yesterday. Anytime we arrogantly state something can't be that way, we are profoundly wrong. And that's why I feel like the research and stuff that we've had is kind of dwindling. There's some thoughts that the discoveries in the scientific communities are going down. And that's why there's all these different things, is because the things that we should be looking at, nothing's happening because of the current paradigm and that perspective, and that we've said, oh, it can't be this way, but somebody's going to find something, it's going to change that paradigm, the way it is. You're always one discovery away from crashing your scientific paradigm.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's just the way it works,
Yep. I agree with that. And, I think exactly what you said is what I started thinking, that, humans are by nature in general arrogant. And we've seen it repeatedly. I mean, it was Galileo that they imprisoned. I don't remember if they put him to death or not, but because he decided to tell people that, the Earth isn't the center of the galaxy or the universe or whatever, right? So it's like repeatedly throughout history, we have had these conclusions and we have said, we are right. This is the way it is, and there is no changing it. And it's like, no, repeatedly we've been told that we've been proven wrong. So, right. So there's nothing better that humanity could do than assume that we know nothing when it comes to any subject, and always assume that it's on shaky ground, it can change, I feel like, because it would lead to a lot more research, like you're saying, and less of people saying, I'm not going to look into that because it's proven, the science is settled. I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase.
Science is never settled.
It doesn't matter what topic we're talking about. The science is never settled. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so
it's an ever expanding paradigm of infinite possibilities and exploitations. Like, oh, what's his name? The guy who wanted to discover if things are I'm gonna Google. I have Google right here, so I apologize, folks. I'm gonna start using this more.
and I have a book right now that I'm thinking of that I want to mention, and I can't remember the name of it. So I'm also looking something up because I'm like, it applies. And I had a friend recommend this book to me, and I've read big chunks of it, but it's not that big of a book, but I haven't finished it fully. Anyways, he kind of talks about some of this though too. The premise of the book is that we go through cycles in humanity of when a paradigm is going to be shifted and when our understanding of science is going to change. And it's a really interesting book. And I can't remember the name of it now. It's something to do with the evolution of science, something or the other. And I'm trying to find it, and maybe I will, but it was really interesting. I found it to have implications on a lot of things, not even just science. So
there's a lot of stuff out there that's like that.
And this book's old too. It was written in no later than the 50s. It might be like the 20s. I don't remember, but it's an old book. So, but like, I'm trying.
Success. Okay. It took a lot of weird phrasing in Google to find out. In 1668, Francesco Reggi, an Italian scientist, designed a scientific experiment to test spontaneous creation of maggots by placing fresh meat into two different jars, one where the jar was left open and one that was covered in a cloth. And that's how he discovered that maggots did not come from the meat itself, that a fly had to lay a maggot, Until that happened, they believed that, when a person died, they just spawned maggots. You're just one discovery away. You talked about Galileo. Giordano Bruno was the one who looked at Galileo's work and said, okay, Earth is not the sun is not the center, or the Earth is not the center. The sun is the center. So we're in a solar system and we can see stars. There's likely planets around those stars. And the Catholic Church went, whoa, it gets the stake or it takes back what you said in heresy. And he said, I'm not going to take it back. The issue they had was, if there's multiple Earths, then is there multiple Christs? Or did Christ atone for all those people? If there's people on those Earths, is there one Christ for all those Earths? And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just saying that there's a whole bunch of planets out there. And I'm not taking back what I said because I said it. And they're like, all right, go to the stake and burn. I kind of like a jokingly jest about that, but it was really sad that they disliked his discovery so much and they could not go, I have a dogma. I may be wrong. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong. I wonder if he's right. Instead, they said, I'm right, you're wrong, and you're going to die because of it. I feel like I haven't seen if there's any studies, but I feel like maybe religious people are more inclined to be dogmatic. That might be something that you could look at through your study. Is there a predisposition to dogmatism through religious people?
Yeah. And that, definitely could be. But yeah, you were saying something. Oh, I said, I was thinking to myself, though, thank goodness for prophets, because that question that you just posed, it's like, well, the prophet answered that. We know how that worked. And so we don't have to have any worries about that. So, by the way, I found the book, by the way. It's called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. So, yeah, it was written, it's actually old, younger than I thought. Because I said I didn't think it was any older than the 1950s, but it actually says the original book was written in 1962. So it is a little older than I thought. But
I have 100% heard of his book. Yeah,
it's really interesting. It's really interesting. Like what he proposes is like it's not just science, and I guess it also depends on what you think science is, but it's any idea, any philosophy of life. Like there is a structure about how things change and when the paradigm is going to come. And it's not saying that things we believe now are always wrong. Because I feel like as a member of the church, to an extent, you have to believe in absolute truth. So I'm not saying that like tomorrow all things that we know can change. And religious major, individual who loves philosophy, we can go into a whole debate about what absolute truth is, and whether or not we can know absolute truth, or if only God knows absolute truth, or all this other kinds of stuff. But nonetheless, absolute truth exists, and I do believe that we as people are given some of it. So otherwise, how can there be commandments and covenants? Because if there's no absolute truth and you're breaking something that's supposed to be wrong, well, either it is wrong or it isn't. And anyways, I'll stop with that. But
the thing I find with books is there's too many good ones to read, and my list just grows. And I get too busy and sidetracked. I've just been so busy with my hobbies. I haven't had time to read or made that time. I have a planner that I use to try to like plan my day around. I'm about 60% getting my to-dos done.
It's pretty good.
Try to increase it. So I wanted to do a thought about setting goals, and I've had this theory about the way we should set goals, and it's kind of the new year. And have you heard of the SMART method?
Yes.
It's
Spec-
specific, measurable, execution. Let me see. I have it pulled up.
actionable, or yeah,
Or assign, yeah, specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time related. So the idea is that if you set a goal, be specific in that goal, have a way to measure that goal, assign things to accomplish that goal, be realistic in creating that goal, and then have it be time related. Because if you don't have a timeline to that goal or a deadline, then the goal is never going to be accomplished because you don't have any priorities to commitment. I've been toying with the idea, and I'm actually going to do a self experiment of a new phrase called SMART T's: specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, time related, initiative, execution, and spiritual. And so the idea is the initiative, you have to have initiative. So if your realism and initiative have to align. So be realistic. Okay, cool. Now I have a realistic goal. I've assigned ways I'm going to do that goal, but what is my initiative or motivation to do that goal? And then with the SMART goal, it gives you these ideas of how to do the goal, but it doesn't really tell you about how to go about execution. And then at first I was thinking that S at the end could be success, but I feel like we got to, in a spiritual aspect, we got to tie that back to God and talents that we have with God. Where in my goal, where does this put me in God? How does this help my faith? Does it ruin my faith? Does it help others? Am I setting myself up? What is kind of like the big community perspective, I guess, in that goal? The stake and the academic communities, let's use that keyword, stakeholders. What's the stakeholder play on the goal? And so I'm using that. I have some specifics I'm going to kind of flesh out and explain it and give some examples for, and try to go after that. Because there's so many good books to read, but if I don't have good goals to do that, I won't. And I feel pretty bad. Like this Brigham Young book I've had since COVID started, and I haven't finished it.
I get you. I get you. So I have a lot of problems with that too. So
and oddly enough, I have a Graham Hancock America Before. I haven't finished that. It's just because the visualizations I get while I'm reading it is just too much for me to handle. So I gotta chill. There's just too many questions being asked. Now that's an interesting individual. I know a lot of people love or hate him, and obviously he does have his own dogmas of he's very specific, and he's technically not an archaeologist, but he's studied it enough. He's a pseudo archaeologist with a perspective, but he's basically arguing that humanity's timelines are wrong and that the scientific community is too dumb to acknowledge that, and they refuse to acknowledge evidences coming out of things just getting older and older and older and older, which I feel like if we don't destroy our society, we're going to find stuff that's going to destroy the scientific theories completely. You know, let's hypothetically say we dig deep enough and some clown finds a UFO. What then? Like, and the governments don't come in. He has news crews come in, and everyone goes over this, and everyone tests it, and it's from material that's not found on Earth. What then? What then? How do we tie that? The current answer in 2023 is shun them. Cast them out. They're a heretic.
Yeah. Yep. You can't have dissenting views right now, unfortunately. So it's you think about it, and it's been a long time coming, because it started. I mean, you think about, for example, I went to Liberty University for my bachelor's degree in religion, which was very interesting, by the way, to go to a school, non-denominational Christian school, to see their perspective on things coming from a Latter-day Saint religion, So, but anyways, one of the classes we had to watch this movie called Is Genesis History? And I found it to be really interesting because one of the premises in the movie was they talked to these scholars and they say, yeah, I've studied these rocks and stuff, and think that the scientific community is all wrong about dating these rocks. And they go into all these reasons, something to do with the flood and cataclysmic events happening, biblical cataclysmic events happening that actually altered formations of rocks and the layers of rock. And so they're making assumptions about things that they can't. And I found it really fascinating. But somebody like that, and that movie was fairly old even when I watched it, that people like that have been ostracized for decades and decades, like since, and I'd have to look because I actually read recently a book, one of my classes, we had to read something kind of sort of related to this, but anyways, they talked about when the shift happened, and I can't remember when it was right now, but like early 1900s or something, there was a shift that happened, and after that everything changed with how they address stuff, and partially because of Darwin,
post-Darwinism.
Yeah, so if you have a dissenting view, and like even back then you started to become ostracized, and now we're here 50, 60, 70 years later, and now it's so much worse because there's so many subjects that you cannot question. There's more subjects. It's not just a couple, it's all of these things that you cannot have a dissenting view on. You're a heretic if you don't and agree. And it's ironic because again, science of religion is kind of what it's become, that there is a set dogma and it can't be challenged. But
it's become what the Catholic Church used to be. And then if you speak out, you're branded a heretic, and don't listen to them. Right. It's humanity has this issue with tribalism and pitchforks. If we don't like what you say, we're going to pitchfork and mob you, and we're going to get you out.
Right.
If we can't kill you, we're going to drive you away. And the pockets that they're creating, there are some people who are trying to continue the real idea of science. I'm objective. I in that I'm open to new evidence. I'm not set in stone. I haven't, my beliefs change. I go and look at tweets I had in like 2015 or messages on Facebook or posts I did, and I can see I'm a different person. And so to pretend that science isn't changing itself, if you were to explain it to a child would see, yeah, science has changed, and there's some things we probably should go and readdress. It doesn't make sense.
Yep. And I think, that, from my perspective, there's a lot of things that we hold hard and fast to that we just don't need to have an opinion to. Like, for example, with the dating stuff, to me, I'm like, I don't need an opinion on that. I can believe the Bible, and regardless of whether or not they find some pottery that's 50,000 years old, it doesn't change whether or not I believe the Bible is true, so I don't know. I don't feel the need to have to hold to something that, it has to be this way or that way. It's like, okay, I don't understand people who have to be adamant one way or the other, to be honest.
And it goes both ways. You have those Christians who believe that there is no other world but ours. And it's like,
or the earth is 6,000 years old, period. And it's like, the earth can't be older. The Lord could have, there's all that time in between when Adam came on the earth and when the earth was being created and all that other stuff. So it's like, the earth could be older. It could be millions of years older, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. To hold hard and fast, that to me doesn't make sense. It's better to have an open mind and just say, I'll just consider information as it's presented to me and make a decision, an educated decision. But for me, that decision is never firm. It's never, this is it, unless the prophet of God came out and said, I received revelation and this is it, then I'm probably not going to have a firm opinion on that. So
to go back to that GRE episode 1918 with John Reeves, they were pulling out the muck, so like water runs down, dirt and silt builds up, and so it's just like a whole bunch of mud, and if you wash out the mud, stuff is revealed, and that's how they're finding this stuff. So they're literally just spraying the sides with water, and they can go and pull these mammoth tusks out. And one of the mammoth tusks that they pull out, what they do is they put clamps around them because it's been underwater and it's been moisturized. Well, when it dries, it can crack. And so to prevent it from cracking, they put clamps around it just to kind of keep it a shape because they're very valuable. Well, the inside of a mammoth tusk I believe they have like marrow segments through it because it's ivory, it's a bone. Well, as they were doing that, a blue feather came out of the inside of the tusk. Inside of the tusk, they found a blue feather, and it's on his Instagram. Modern paleontologists can't accept that. What was a blue feather doing up there? If the entire world, but then we have dodos that humanity killed. Like it's just, it's depressingly comical on how like ignorant we are with these ideas that things can't change and can't be. It's like when a person who refuses to acknowledge that they're in trouble, they're like, no, I got it. Like, no, babe, you don't.
Yeah. It's interesting how often history repeats itself, and how quick these same people in the scientific community would condemn what the Catholics did to Galileo and how horrible it is, but they're doing the same thing and they don't seem to have the self-awareness to realize that. That's what's so amazing to me.
There's a physicist, Avi Loeb, who came out because there was this object in the solar system that was flying through that they discovered, and people are postulating about it. And he's like, what if it's space trash from an alien civilization? And the whole community went, come on, go get on the stake. We'll go get the fuel. Like you can't state the obvious. And he said, being a statistician and a physicist, probability wise speaking, there are other civilizations. We aren't the only ones out there. Hello. What happens when that does occur? Now, there are people who are branching. Have you heard of astrotheology?
I don't think so.
Ooh, you would like this as a religious major. Astrotheology. I actually do a discussion episode on that, but
okay, it's good to know.
A very long form. I think it's about like 45 minutes, 55 minutes. But astrotheology is the study of earth theology and alien theology and what happens to the two. Because if you look in history, anytime you have a civilization that's more advanced, technologically wise, culturally, or whatever, whenever they come across a less advanced civilization, there's always some play. And so in my conversation or in my thought, I talk about what happens to the major Abrahamic religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. How do traditional Jews, Muslims, and Christians deal with a verified, unequivocally can't doubt contact with beings from another world? How do you move your faith forward? A lot of the scientific thought is, earth religions are going to collapse. And so I kind of feel like no, because you have some Christians who believe that, if you see an alien, it's just a demon in a different skin. It's interesting thought, and it also is a way of showing that theology is progressing in its thought and conversations. I feel like theology is one of those weird segments where it is accepting new evidence. I think the most common one is they believe that it's widely believed, but they believe that when Moses led the children of Israel out, that the religion that created of Judaism was a large mixture of Egyptian belief and Palestinian beliefs that they adopted from the region of the Canaanites. I don't hold any sway to that, but we can't deny that there was cultural influences that happen along the way. And that's kind of like what astrotheology is looking at, is like what happens culturally and theologically to these peoples of these faiths. It's kind of an interesting subject that you can address all forms of religion. But I wanted to focus on the Abrahamic perspective because that's a paradigm I can associate with and kind of understand. Mm-hmm. I've not been corrected by anybody yet, so I'm open to criticism. That's why I included the blogs have page lengths of references, because I wanted to take a scholarly approach to these ideas I have, because we can be wrong. So I think that's something that's awesome. I'm excited to see your research. And if tell you what, pro bono, I'd proofread your stuff, just because I'm a nosy body, and I would love to do that.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because
So you
I
have
may need
a
help
friend
with
in
that.
need.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and I've kind of heard before some of the things that you said about Moses, and because I've heard, in one of my classes recently, it was mentioned briefly. It wasn't like a big part of the text, but it mentioned briefly that there are theologians that are believing that the 12 tribes of Israel were not related in any way. It was just groups of people that just said, we're going to come together, and they kind of made their own thing. And so I've kind of heard something similar before, which is ironic in that, like you said, they're open-minded to things, but at the same time, I feel like they can be more open-minded into self-destruction. Like they can be so open-minded about things that they will destroy the very idea of spiritualism, period, because they'll turn it into something extraordinarily scientific and physical and historical in the world. So I don't know, theologians fascinate me because I don't know, they just it goes beyond the spiritual sometimes. And nowadays, especially too, it fascinates me how they want to force religions to evolve culturally. So they're pushing for things like gay marriage in our church, and acceptance of transgender, non-binary individuals, and whether or not gender is an eternal concept, and all this stuff. And on the surface, you're like, okay, you're a bleeding heart. You feel for these people who feel ostracized or whatever, don't feel like they fit into the existing culture. But at the same time, I wonder if they ever, and this kind of goes back into the thesis thing I was talking about earlier, the research proposal thing. I wonder if they ever sit there and think, what is the implication of having somebody completely transform their standard for morality? Like, what's the implication to a religion when you're going to say, we're going to flip everything on its head, and all of these teachings and things that we believe in, and how a society should behave, and how people should act, and what's right and wrong, and all this stuff? What does that do not only to a religion, but the people in it and society, when you're just like, we're going to change all of it? We're going to just say that we can accept all these things now, that all of these scriptures and documents and ancient teachings said that you shouldn't do. Like, what does that do? Because I don't know. I don't know how to say this very well, but I just feel like there are so many people being reckless.
They're not.
So they're just like,
the cultural paradigm, in that sense, that you need to adopt pronouns, you need to do this, you need to be pro LGBT. I don't condone or have bigotry towards those individuals. I have friends and some family that are in those groups, and I love and care for them, and I wish them the best, right? I wish for them to have success. But from an outsider's perspective, looking at what's going on, there is no implication. It's go and do as you see. And then lately there's been a lot of conversation about people who went a certain way and have realized that's not for me, and I was just going along with the crowd, and now I'm stuck, and I have long-term health implications because of it. Or I'm in a way, and I realize I'm not happy that way, and that it wasn't me. I feel like that's just human nature, to be adopted to a cause. It's just whatever the new cause is. Like, there's an account on Twitter, Chivalry. Chivalry something. He posted a book read. Lex Friedman posted this book list for 2023. He's like reading a book a week or whatever, something ridiculous. And he was getting canceled because of some of the books that were on there, which absolutely hilarious, getting canceled for books. But of all the things that he's done, a book list is what did it. And then somebody posted this list of like, these are the books you should be reading. And it was an account that was based on chivalry. And they excluded all Eastern chivalry. It was
All
only
Eastern.
Eastern. Yeah. It was all Western, the Templars, the Crusaders, like all these Western Christian. But if you go and take an Eastern perspective and you look at how the Westerners lived, a lot of the chivalry that you believe is actually from Eastern traditional practices. Like the Moors helped improve and give chivalry. In fact, it came from the Moors' treatment of their horses. That's where chivalry comes from. And so like this singular paradigm of like Eastern versus Western orthodoxy, it's like that meme, which way, Western man? I feel like that's just even more telling of where we're at culturally, that it's like Christianity wants to gatekeep so hard that they neglect that there is Eastern Orthodox Christians who do have certain views, who are Gnostic and have their set of scriptures they believe are more accurate in their way of belief. So are they not Christian because they don't believe in the same God? Because they're, the whole Trinitarian and that conversation. So it's just hilarious that there's that kind of gatekeeping going on. I know there's a lot of thoughts in there. I'm just kind of babbling off too. So
Yeah, no, I get you though. That's that. There's it's in an arrogant, and it only seems, maybe I'm wrong, and it could be. It only ever seems to be the West, though, that assumes the West is the way things should be, and that the Eastern, Middle Eastern, wherever, is wrong or irrelevant. I don't see that when I interact with people from the East, and maybe that's because they're becoming influenced by Western thought, so
yeah,
they don't have a reason to not disregard it. But it's just very interesting to me because, like, when you said that, it made me think about this last year with Come Follow Me and different things. I know there were some things about Middle Eastern, what would you call it, the culture on how you treat people and travelers and visitors and all these different things, these customs they had, and how really amazing it was, what their standards were, and how it was unacceptable to turn away somebody, a traveler who was in need. And some of that had to do with the fact that it was an arid desert climate, and like there was this idea of do unto them as you would want someone to do unto you, and people need help and all the stuff. But I found it really fascinating because it's not that wasn't a Western thing as far as I'm aware, really, at all. Maybe in some places it was. But I found it really interesting in how, like, there'll be some people that would disregard even looking into whether or not there's something to learn there because it's from the Middle East. And some of those practices are still done today. Islamic countries still practice a lot of that stuff. And similar things can be said about Eastern religions and Asia and stuff, that they have things there and things that they did that were good, and that for some reason, sometimes we in the West seem to think that we're so arrogant that we don't have anything to learn there. When it's like, for example, in Asian countries in general, man, are they family oriented? Man, are they community oriented, or what's the word? We're individual oriented in the West. There's a word for it in the out east, and I forget what it is, but community oriented is the best that I can think of it right now. But it's about what you can do for the community as a whole, not yourself. Now, I think in some places it can be taken to an extreme. I don't want to say anything that could get me in trouble, but I've seen it to an extent where people put their own well-being well below where it should be because they're worried about friends and family and stuff. And that seems to be a big thing within certain parts of Asian culture in some countries, where it's so important to take care of your family and stuff that you have all these obligations, and you don't shy away from them or whatever. So even if it causes you harm or whatever, you continue to do it. So don't get me wrong, I'm saying that there it can be taken to their own not good extremes, but at the same time, the idea of how close they are as families and how important it is to take care of each other. And I mean, in the Philippines where my wife is from, I mean, people can't afford it anyways, but there's no such thing as a rest home. Your grandma is going to live with you when she's unable to take care of herself anymore, and you're going to take care of her, and she's going to continue to be part of the family. She's going to live with you because that's just the way it is. You don't pawn them off someplace. And I find a lot of that stuff to be really remarkable and amazing. And I wish that it would rub off a little bit more in the West, because I think that having those family bonds and those relationships is really important.
Bless you.
Sorry, did I mute it? I tried to mute it.
Oh,
Did
you got it. That was
Okay.
beautiful.
Okay,
Play,
good.
pro level
Okay.
play. You're a
Okay.
podcaster. You need to
Sweet.
start doing that.
Sweet.
Better than
Okay.
I.
Good. Because I was like, sorry, because you said bless you. So I was like, okay, hopefully that's
I know what you're doing.
Okay. So
for those who just listen to the audio version of this, he sneezed and muted it like a pro. I have always been fascinated with Eastern religion. Actually, before I joined the church as a convert, I was secretly studying Eastern religions and ideologies. I've always had a fascination for Islam and at a certain extent, and I've kind of been doing a lot of research into that aspect. And my current standing is, I feel like what the church has said, that Muhammad was a prophet. Reading into Islam and seeing the Quran, I was really inclined, like, oh man, maybe I am wrong. But I started looking and asking more questions, and I realized, wait a minute, the current Islam of the world today, with the very different beliefs and systems that it has, because it's not, if you have a Muslim, they're going to be they could be completely different. You have 10 Muslims in a room, that you can have 10 different beliefs, right? Just like Christianity. And so the West typically paints a Muslim as they're all the same, but that's not at all true. And so what I kept coming down to was, man, I have a question on this. It would be really helpful if we had a prophet. And so it actually reaffirmed my belief, and God has to call prophets, because there's no way he can just give us one book, because look what happened. I'm not bashing their belief. I'm just saying, for me, it doesn't make sense, like why it would suddenly stop. And looking at that, so I've absorbed a lot of their culturalism that I just can see. And something that's big in those communities is this Western centrism, that Western ideas are so good, but at the same time they're absolutely terrible. And the West does not want to learn. Like in Ukraine, they had reporters on CNN going, Ukraine is not like the Middle East. This is not a war-torn country. Meanwhile, Ukraine, through 2008 and 2014, total takeovers since, like, basically Soviet Union, they've been killing each other, and they're white, so we shouldn't expect them to act like this because they're not Middle Easterners. And that was absolutely the most racist and terrible thing. And nobody got called out for it. Nobody, it ran on Al Jazeera and the Saudi Arabia news stuff. It was like real big in those communities, like, look how terrible the West is, see how terrible they are. But yeah, you're right. Being in Japan for 5 years, I would say that if I'm in a terrible accident, if I had to choose between being in America or in Japan, I would choose Japan every single day, because I know for a fact, having witnessed it, people are going to stop and try to help you. I came across an older man. He was in his 60s riding a little 50cc scooter. A car wasn't paying attention, clipped him. It broke his helmet. He hit the curb. He had a huge gash, like bleeding through. 4 cars had pulled over. One car pulled over and was like pushing people out to give a safety barrier. I was on my motorcycle, so I just shot down towards the fire department. And as I rolled up, the ambulance was rolling to the scene. So I'm like, wow, okay. I was just gonna, like, hey guys, you guys should come follow me. And I've seen it. Recently there was a military service member who passed away drowning. Where they were swimming out was a bad spot. They were given bad information. They didn't have the right safety gear, and they got caught in a rip current. A local jumped into the water to go save them. Right. The creator of Yu-Gi-Oh died here in Okinawa because he saw someone drowning and went out to go rescue them. I don't know if it's just because of my bias, but I don't remember seeing that kind of stuff, that kind of help. Like, I feel like people have blinders on. Like, I've gone past so many terrible accidents in the States. And so it's kind of changed my perspective. I have the skills and capability to provide temporary medical care. So if I see that, I'm going to stop and do something to provide that temporary medical care, to assist in any way that I can to help make sure that they get home to their family or and get the attention that they need. In the States, I've seen some terrible accidents and not a soul stopped. And so I feel like there is a huge dichotomy of differences and prioritization. And I used the word earlier, but I actually kind of like the idea of a stakeholder. And that also requires being self-aware. You need to know your dogmas, and you need to know how your actions will affect everybody at large. They use it more for ethics of companies and how they manage stuff, but everyone's a stakeholder in society. If you don't like the way society is, you need to take that onus. I know Shreveport, Louisiana has a really bad crime rate, and these older men were tired of these fights breaking out at high school. And so they all got together, they got red t-shirts. I can't remember what they did. And they just showed up at school. That's all they did. They talked to the principal, said, this is what we want to do. We want to show a presence, and we want to be there to prevent these kids from being knuckleheads and make sure that they go to school and they learn something and not go to the streets. And they've been doing that since then. That, I feel like, is community onus. And I feel like it's starting to spread, but it's very slow. Like there is good people doing good things. I want to downplay that, but I feel like you see it more in Eastern countries.
And I think I would like to believe, at least from the way that I understand history and the way things are portrayed on television and in movies, when you're watching historical dramas and the like as well, that the United States used to be more of help your neighbor. But we've evolved. We became way too materialistic, and in the process of doing that, we became way too self-centered, and now we don't care about other people like we should. We care about making as much money as we can, becoming wealthy, Insta famous, Twitter famous, whatever, and we don't care about the consequences of how our actions affect other people, and it's sad. So I hope that we can get back there, and I think we will. I think there's opinion of me, myself, only, but we're coming into hard times, and people are going to wake up, and you're going to see some people, I hope people in the church, who are going to do a lot of good and you're going to see their best selves in them helping people and stuff. And you're going to see other people who become their most terrible selves, because they're going to be, so anyways, I just think hard times are coming, and people are going to have to realize, oh yeah, a lot of stuff that I was focused on doesn't matter. And some people will reorient and be a help to their community, and there will be a lot of people that will continue to cause chaos. But anyways, so
yeah, we could have a whole episode just on like the online content creator, like people literally giving alms just to be seen of man. Like they go and find these people to play to be homeless, and then do all this stuff to like, look what we're doing. And then it's like, that was her uncle, the like estranged uncle that just looked like a beggar, and he pretended to be just for clout and internet fame. And it's so easy to drive a persona online, and it not be real at all. It's like, if you watch news things, they put clips like this is for entertainment purpose. Like that's okay. Thanks for your honesty. I also think that, I don't know, I kind of feel like where we're at society wise, I feel like we're actually in a very peaceful time compared to where we've been. And I feel like there's going to be an increase of violence in the world, and it's going to perpetuate to what we've never seen the likes of. Because if we just go and look at what Genghis Khan did, they literally went in and murdered Millions. He killed so many people, he reduced the carbon output of humanity, which there's some people that some globalists think, they get wet dreams over that.
Yeah,
That
unfortunately.
destroy humanity. But humanity's done some terrible stuff. We are in this weird time where we've actually kind of agreed that, having things and these hobbies and entertainments is nice. Like, we're living in the platonic dream. There are some bad things about society. There are terrible things going on, but for the most part, it's pretty solid.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be
Not
honest.
not bad.
Somebody somebody watching this may take this clip one day if ever I make it and I'm a little bit sort of kind of known by anybody, and say something about this and say, look how terrible he is. But the only reason why we have to have discussions about stuff like transgenderism in our society today is because we are a relatively peaceful society. We're a relatively stable society, and have our needs met. Because when this world collapses, when we have real violence that you've talked about, those are not going to be things that people are going to be thinking about, that they're going to have their life focus on. Because whether or not you feel like a woman inside a man's body is irrelevant to whether or not you're going to survive, regardless of the fact of whether or not you'll have access to hormones and whatever else to make yourself feel like you're the opposite gender of what you actually biologically are. And people want to say that that's, gender is relative. But so when things eventually go a different direction, I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff go away. I think it has to. Out of necessity. So
we're spoiled, and when you're spoiled, you look at things that, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. I really feel like gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia is a real thing. People
I
really
agree.
do feel like that.
I agree.
It is an issue. Those are real things, and people that are dealing with those thoughts, I feel for them and I pray for them, and I hope that they get through that. But just going back, we are in such a weird time, and we've built our society in such a globalistic perspective that our supply chain is like, I think they say it's 7 days from total collapse of things shutting down, and people, and then, I was watching a TikTok this morning alive. This guy is a cat content creator. His cat is kind of crazy and fun to watch. And he created a new word, and he said, go to other pages and use this word and phrase and tag me in it. And on the live, people were doing that. If that spreads like wildfire, what happens when the internet's never coming back on? That ever-present something about being where I'm at career-wise, where I'm at, this is an active area of operation, which means the military is performing and conducting military missions, and at some points is conducting shows of force and is helping to provide stability to the region from Russia, North Korea, and China.
Especially.
I don't know if you saw a picture, but from Osan, they took pictures of a rocket trail that you could see from North Korea. And the jokes were, so that's how 2023 starts, right? It's a very present, very real situation of society. It just takes a couple countries get mad at each other, and it's going to be not World War III. It's going to be countries at War III, because it's going to be, well, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it. And the world isn't so European centric as it used to be. And there's a lot of conflict going on. Like, there's stuff going on that American media, Western media isn't covering just because it doesn't care. There's stuff going on all around the world. They just don't care. Like Syria, when's the last time you heard something about Syria? When conflict is still going on there. That is a terrible mess, right? So the problems that we have are first world problems. there's a comedian who's talking about, he was on a plane flight and they said, we're proud to announce this is the first test experimental flight for internet, for Wi-Fi on a plane. And into it, they tell everyone how to use it. And this guy's using it. And guess what? It broke. And this guy is making a huge complaint and complaining and griping about the Wi-Fi not working and thinking it's the biggest crime against humanity. And he's like, look, buddy, you didn't know this existed 5 minutes ago. Shut up. Like, our problems are so, it's so realistic. My wife is from Brazil, and I feel like you've had this too, where it's like you're being an American right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Because my problems really aren't problems, but it's my life. Like, some first world problems are not really problems when you compare them to other third world. Like, there's people right now striving and starving for food. We're grateful for what we have. And it's sad to see that, these are the things that we're complaining about, but I feel like that's what society is we're trying to progress it in ways that we can provide a benefit to all stakeholders and what their say is. So I want to put down on anybody in these societies because they have a right to live in this society. I'm of the persuasion now that I'm not a perfect judge. I don't know everything. I believe what I believe, and it's working out for me, and I'm going to let God judge them for their crimes. And there's certain things that if we have undeniable evidence of complete violence and disregard for, care of people's consent, like a mass murderer, yeah, sure, put them to death. I don't care. But other than that, I don't care. Do what you want. Now I may change on that, be a little bit more theocratic, but I just feel like I'm more of like a theocratic anarchist at this point. Like, I would prefer theocracy with a divinely appointed king and prophet leading as a government, because when it does happen, it works really well. But if it's not, I feel like people have the right to self-govern. And if we're wrong, at the judgment day, we'll pay for it.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I don't know, from an existing government, the way that things are in the United States, I would definitely lean more libertarian in my views on things, with few exceptions. I would like to call myself a full-fledged libertarian, but really the one issue that I cannot can't get beyond is abortion. Like, that's just the one that I'm like, I cannot say that it's just the right of the woman. I can't. It's just, I can't do that. So, and I know that for most libertarians, that is like women should be able to decide that. But for the most part, I feel like with our existing government and the way it is, libertarianism seems to be the answer. But ultimately, what I would really like, what I think would be good for society, is if we had the ability to better self-isolate, like for people to move around and to be able to get with like-minded people and to separate from the others that you don't agree with fully and live your life. And so in that regard, if that were to happen, if all the saints could go back to Utah and the people that don't like the church and the church's beliefs leave Utah, and we can have a government set up that is based on our beliefs, I think that would be the best for society. Because as much as I like the idea of people having the ability to choose to do whatever they want, at the end of the day, we do understand that morality has an impact on people and on the way we live. So having commandments and having, the things that we believe be semi-enforceable. I don't know that everything that the church believes that is a commandment is like something that should be a crime and you go to jail or you're executed for something. But generally speaking, if that's the way that society were to operate, I think we'd be better for it if we said, we believe these things and this is the way that we expect people to act in society. And so I would like for it to come to that, to be honest. to see us separate so that we can have that piece of saying, okay, we're gonna live this way, and this is how we're going to, as a community, agree. These are the general standards that we want to raise our children with and stuff, so that we have a homogenous society. And we don't have that right now at all. So instead, what we have are just everybody being upset about what everyone else believes and arguing and fighting. And so just saying, with the exception of harm to other people, live and let live, that's like the only other solution with the way our government is right now. If we all just said, I'm gonna let you be you, you let me be me, and we're not gonna fight, that's the best we can do. And but the thing is, though, is you still, I don't know, I think there's still issues with that. But anyways,
it's a complicated thing. I know a lot of detractors point to the Book of Mormon, and we only see a brief thing about how their laws are. It's kind of the way Mormon compile, because you have to remember the Book of Mormon, for those who are not really familiar with, is a man named Mormon took all these records from the ancient peoples in the Americas, and they had different records, and he abridged them together, and that's why it's called the Book of Mormon, because he put them together, right? Similarly to how the Bible was formed, like by King James. They took all these different books and they said, we like these, we don't like these, and they basically made what they want. So he basically did that with the American records. And in there, some of the records, he's basically abridging, and he's going to these primary records, and he's like giving you the cliff notes of what happens, just because there's so much going on. So there's a lot left out. And in there, we do see that some crimes were automatically, meant death. And I feel like that's where those topics of like the blood atonement come from and stuff. Is just that we need to put that paradigm. Hey, this isn't everything. We just know that there's certain things that were automatic, causes to be put to death. My thing is with like what your statement, I really do feel like, yeah, I'm not even a fan of libertarianism at this point, because I feel like it gives away to too much. There's a point in society that you can't give away to everything, because if you look at the free for all, people doing hard drugs on the ground and going around and robbing, that's not beneficial. Companies are losing money, therefore they're going to charge more money for their products, or they're going to be less restrictive, or just completely close stores. Like there's Walmarts in America that have completely closed because the amount of crime that they suffer. They said, we can't take a loss on this anymore. We're completely closed. So now people are having to suffer and go all the way. So society has to have some rules that we agree. If you do this, this happens. There has to be consequences. And I think what line needs to draw, what the line is where does it remove someone's consent, and where are the stakeholders at on that consent? If somebody can't consent, then we shouldn't be enacting a law. Like Oxford in England is passing a law that's preventing people from traveling outside Oxford with a car. Like, okay, now you're restricting my right because you have this terrible idea that human-driven climate change is going to be somehow magically stopped by it, not the fact that the Earth actually goes through random changes in heat. Like we had dinosaurs and we had woolly mammoths. Science says you're dumb. But I feel like the homogeneity and diversity is a huge conversation. There's pros and cons. I would say I'm more of like a radical centrist, that I think there's beneficiary benefits, or there's benefits rather, of homogeneity with a mixed diversity in between, because if you're too homogenous, you'll never be open to new ideas that could improve you. And if you're too diverse, you'll never go anywhere, because it's a free for all and there's no directional input. There's a point where diversity becomes an anarchy, and companies can't perform. And there's actually research being done on that topic of companies not performing as well because they're too diverse, because they said, okay, we need to be so diverse. And then they push that way. And suddenly they realized, okay, we hired a bunch of people who were kind of qualified, but there's a bunch of people who are more qualified. And so now we're kind of hurting because of that. So there should be a free, like, it's a very multifaceted question. And I would say it's like a tesseract when it comes to designing a society. Like if you and I were to sit down and we were given an eighth continent, or heck, Antarctica is now warm and a beautiful place, and we're going to be plotting and designing a government to rule there, what do we do? And so I don't think there's a good answer. And at the end of the day, we're making choices that affect others, and we're gonna have to pay for those choices and how that results.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree. I
it's
agree.
kind of,
And to be clear too, I when I'm saying I'm a proponent of libertarianism, I'm always saying that as far as I am able to observe, that seems to be the only thing that seemed to be remotely feasible to me at this point with how fragmented our society is. So
yeah.
not necessarily but yeah, so I see what you're saying. And yeah, I see what you're saying. It's not, I'm glad I'm not the one making these decisions. So
That's also a conversation to tie back to what we were talking about, astrotheology. The big question is, when we do go to Mars, what do we do? Is Mars a colony of Earth, or is Mars its own place because they're so far away and they're going to have to enact their own laws that are going to be to the specificities of the location, right? That's just the way it is. And
yeah,
not to digress, but the next frontier, the next wild west is the space. Once
yeah,
we start getting the technology that is consistently reliant, cheap, and affordable, people are going to be leaving the earth, just like in the early 1800s when they saw, the what do they call the term, that time period, the Victorians. People were tired of Victorian society, and they looked out west and they said, I'm eating beaver, and they went out and they left society. And the Americas was founded based off of that principle, which is kind of a fulfilling to the true prophecy that, if the world had known about the Americas, they would have bastardized it and just destroyed everything, which we've seen. Like on my side of the family, my ancestors were original founders of Nova Scotia. Like, they went to Nova Scotia from Scotland. They wanted a better life. We're going to have, the next Nova Scotia is Mars. The next New England, moons of Jupiter, right? If we don't destroy ourselves with nuclear catastrophe or whatever, or the second
or
coming.
yeah,
If we
yeah,
get to
or
that point,
Christ
that,
doesn't come
yeah.
first.
But I also had this idea. One of the things I talked about is, what God said always stuck in stone, or can God change his prophecies? We're always reaffirmed because somebody went through and in that prophecy said, just reaffirmed, I am the way, and this is how it will be, right? And what I have said will come to fruition, right? But he's an omnipotent being who has choice for everything. What if the real mission is to see how we perform in the long term? What if Christ's coming doesn't happen for another 3,000 years?
I hope not. To be
Right?
honest, with the way things are right now, I hope not. But we do know, and I have read examples of prophecies that were conditional. This will happen if, that community doesn't do X. And one of them I read was, one of the early apostles of the church went to some part of the United States, and they went there, and a prophecy was given: if they reject you, then the city's going to be obliterated. And there have been some, I don't know whether or not that prophecies come to fruition or not. Like, it still could just be something that's going to happen in the future, but there have been some who have argued that clearly it's not something that's going to happen. So the Lord withdrew his judgment on that city or whatever. So there is an idea of, that some prophecies can be conditional on, the Lord says that if you don't do blank, then then I'll punish you or whatever, or you won't get blessings, or the opposite, that if you do blank, I'll give you blessings. So you never know. I just, yeah, I don't know.
That's where the philo theology, it's like philosophy and theology. It all used to be the same. We used to call it science, but then it divulged into studies. But it's just something interesting to think about. Something that I think about is this idea of the American Taliban, is what the liberals are calling it. And I've had a thought before of these Christian groups that are so sure that this is the end times and that Christ is right around the corner. I have come across some things where people are asking, let's take more drastic measures to make sure that the second coming does happen. And that's something that I think is going to be more prevalent is uh theo driven terrorism from a Western perspective.
I could see that.
As a karma to what the West has done to the majority of the Middle East through Islamic martyrdom, is going to come back 100% and bite the West in the butt, because of how we treated the Middle East and the Muslims at large, and type group them as to, being all suicide bombers. I could totally, it's in they have movies about it. So obviously the CIA is thinking that, they're trying to encourage the Christians to go be, bombers and do stuff. And, people have been doing some terrible stuff.
Well, and the FBI has infiltrated certain groups to instigate them into doing things like the whole Gretchen Whitmer governor kidnapping, where it turns out that like
the
it
FBI
was really,
it.
the FBI was really the one pushing for that. It wasn't like some dude there was like, hey, I got this idea, let's do this. It was like, hey guys, we want you to do this. Hey, go. And they persuaded them to do it is really what happened.
I can't remember his name. But there was
although one of the guys just got convicted. So
yeah, I just saw that. There's a Muslim man, immigrant to America, wasn't doing well, wasn't working a good job, didn't have a good, his friends group was very small. He was kind of an outcast, and the FBI basically planted and radicalized this man, and to the point to where they were like, hey, you should think about building a bomb and doing that. And then like they were literally gaslighting him to terrorism and pushing him over the edge, and arrested him on terrorism charges when he actually went through to follow through, because they had been in his ear all the. I'm like, what kind of evil crap is that? Where we have entrapment,
but
of
not
such
really
a psychological scale, where they're literally driving somebody to go do some insidious act, and then they get a promotion and look good. Anyway, that's a whole topic, but that is a thing. Like the CIA killed the sitting U.S. president, and they labeled anybody who said you disagreed as a conspiracy theorist, and it comes out they did. And then media silence. Or at least
they were heavily involved, right? Because that one CIA agent was interacting with Oswald and stuff is what I read. I didn't get a whole lot more than that, but I think that's also because they still haven't released stuff. Like they're still holding off on stuff about that, because correct me if I'm wrong, but in regards to that, wasn't it like too that they what's it called when they redact, like a bunch of stuff was redacted, but then they found some other stuff that wasn't or something, so they could piece it together and say, hey, this dude with the CIA was involved with this. Like, so I think the CIA was still trying to hide it. It just kind of happened that somebody pieced it together that they said, well, actually, if you look at these couple things that, anyways, it's on Daddy Aunt and Robber type stuff. Is what it is.
And it's the government, and there's so many things that we should be angry and upset about, and we're not. And I just feel like that's the adversary just trying to divide us and get us sidetracked. I'm not trying to say that same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria isn't a conversation worth to be having, but there's just a lot of worthless hoopla that at the end of the day, when I look at these other issues that are bigger issues, I feel like that's where we should be. And at a certain point, you lose homogeneity for diversity. It's kind of like a sliding scale, and it tips. Once you start going one way or another, it starts tipping. There's no easy way out to answer it. It's just it's terrible. Like Ted Kaczynski recently passed away. He was the Unabomber, right? People don't talk about this. Ted Kaczynski was literally an experiment of the CIA MK Ultra project, where they were dosing him with acid, and he was literally tortured while he was a undergraduate student. A brilliant man who was misled by evil perpetuators. You have all these things going on, modern Gandhi ants and robbers. What's the priests or the lawyers of Pahonai? there's another one. We always look at the Gadianton robbers, but there was that sect of lawyers that were,
with Zeezrom.
with Zeezrom's,
Zeezrom's
followers,
buds.
right?
Zeezrom
There's secret
repented, but the other ones
combinations.
didn't.
And then that's something too that, I've done things that I feel really terrible about, and I've prayed to be forgiven for those, and I've sought to improve my life and live a certain way. But secrets are coming out on the rooftops. They are being shouted out. Things are coming out. And it's a fulfillment of prophecy. We're seeing that right now, and people are, oh no, it's it's kind of weird. My book in the 1800s is talking about this, and it's happening really well. It's happened a lot.
Yep.
But it's all happenstance. It's different like that.
Yep.
But yeah, there's this. I feel like at the end of the day, I would trust an all-powerful, all-knowing being over the faculties of man. And I hope that at the end of the day that there's justice with mercy, that it's equal, an equal amount of justice, an equal amount of mercy, because there are a lot of people who have been wronged. And that's a big debate in theology. Like, why would God send us here to punish us? I feel like there will be some mercy at the end of that. There has to be, because like, where's the equality? Where's the divine equality of the situation and what people go through? Because if we all have to come here and experience it, like, why do some people get to live it really well, and then meanwhile, people living in terrible situations their entire life, or don't live very long? So it's always interesting to have these conversations.
Yeah. And one thing we do get to know is that, God makes all things right in the end. There's a lot of things that we don't have answers to, that we don't know how things are going to work, but it's going to make it right in the end. There's even, because this is a conversation I've had multiple times with my wife, people have questions about ceilings, and how certain stuff's going to work. If your mom, I know one example, and I know a lady who actually left the church over this years ago when I still lived in Utah. Her and her husband, so her mom had been married to some guy. He died in a war. She was sealed to him. She got remarried to another man, and this man is who she had all of her children with. Well, according to our understanding, so far as I'm aware of it, and as she and her husband were aware of it, he is sealed to that first man that she was married to, not to the second man, because that was where the temple marriage happened and all that other stuff. So anyways, it really upset him, this idea that he was sealed to this man who he doesn't know, and wasn't his father, and all the stuff. And similarly, my wife was raised, without going into all the details, she was raised by her grandmother. So and because of her situation with her parents and different stuff, and this is her paternal grandfather or grandmother, she's not going to be sealed to that grandmother, because her parents aren't ever going to be sealed. And so she's always like, she's always wondered, how does that work? How, this woman that raised me, she's my grandmother, I love her, and I can't be sealed to her because my parents were never married, they're never going to be married, and they're not going to be sealed together, and they each have their own spouses and all this stuff. And and she when she served a mission, I think it was Elder Bednar that came to her mission, anyways, and he made a comment, and this is just the way that it is with all of these things that we don't know, that it wasn't fair, is the Lord makes everything right in the end. So you just have to trust in the Lord. All of those things are going to be worked out. And that's in this specific instance, it is an example of sealings. But, if a man lived, he was raised in a terrible household and had a horrible upbringing and ended up doing terrible things, is he going to be sent to the celestial kingdom for the rest of his life? Or is God going to have mercy and look at him and say, your life could have been like this if you had been raised in a different environment or whatever. So I'm holding you to a different standard. You're making it into the celestial kingdom or wherever. So, like, all of that stuff is going to be worked out in the end. The Lord is going to be merciful with that. The only thing I have more to say on that is with us and our understanding of the gospel is that we cannot excuse ourselves, because the opposite end of
No.
that gets into the whole, well, the Lord's gonna, the whole, I may get a few stripes, but the Lord will let me in heaven in the end kind of thing. So we have to remember, like, we have been given a great privilege to have the gospel and to be taught what is right and what is wrong. So we are expected to live to a very high standard. And so we have to do our very best. Obviously we will still fall short, and I hope that the Lord's mercy applies to us too. We just cannot excuse ourselves, though. We can't excuse ourselves and things that we do that's wrong. We have to repent. And if that requires that we go to the bishop for that repentance or whatever, then we do it. We can't excuse it. So, but either way, in the long run, it's a very reassuring thought to think that the Lord is going to be merciful and just and fair with all things that happen in the end. So if we do our best, if we really try our best, and if we gave it our all, I really believe that we're probably going to be okay. So I think it was Joseph Smith that made that comment about, the Lord is going to be more merciful than you could possibly imagine, but also more just than you could possibly imagine too. Like his vengeance and his justice is going to be more than you can imagine as well. So it goes on both sides. So, but
yeah, who said it? Repent as swiftly as possible.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't have all the answers, and that's something I love about our faith. Is it states we believe that the basics of the gospel have been revealed to us, but there's many truths that have not yet been revealed to us.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder where we would be at as if we were more righteous and connected. Because at this point, I feel like as members of the church, we're not peculiar enough. I don't feel like we're at where the original prophet, like where Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and, President Snow, like everyone that followed, are we at where they were seen? Like when they were in the temple and they had visions, are we at that stage that they saw, or have we digressed? Have we become the children of Israel? Are we going to have to sojourn for some time before, certain requirements are met?
Yeah. Yep.
And
no, I get
it's
that.
an interesting thing. And so, like, I feel at the end of the day, when it comes down to what people's choices, as long as you're not taking away someone's consent, I don't care what you're going to do. But then again, I could change. I could be more strict. Like I've come to the point that as Christians, we shouldn't accept the drinking of alcohol as an okayism in society. There's no benefit to doing it. And look at all the deaths. I think it's like the average is like around 12,000 deaths per year due to drunk driving. How is that acceptable?
Well,
And
and I
like,
think
should we be more strict on that? Like as stakeholders, isn't the prevention of 12,000 deaths, isn't that worth it? Isn't the prevention of crime statistics, isn't that worth? There's a lot of questions. That's why I love having these conversations.
well, and you run into the issue too of, if you let everyone just do what they want and you say, I don't care, well, okay, well, are you condoning then? Is it, because there's a line within the church, there are things that we believe are right and wrong. And so if you just say, okay, well, everyone can do what they want, well, then are you not undermining, that's not the right word, but
Is your inaction supporting their action?
Yeah, well, and are you causing it to be more socially acceptable? Like, are you self-defeating, what you believe and what you teach others of your faith and stuff, because you're saying, people can do what they want, so we're just going to let them do what they want. But we have these standards and beliefs on things that are right and wrong, because so it's very, a lot of this stuff is difficult. So
okay, because Come Follow Me is the New Testament. That's one of my goals. I'm trying to actually do through Come Follow Me, be more consistent with it. Anyway, we're on the New Testament this year. So we are going to be looking at the life of Christ as given to us through the paradigm of Paulinian and King James scripture. I do want to throw in some Gnostic gospels that are out there too, and just kind of throw that into my study. Anyway, if we look at the way Christ interacted, he was very to build the kingdom of heaven and give to Caesar what is Caesar's. so I kind of feel like there maybe is some acceptance to society and to what the laws are. Because you're so focused on building a kingdom ahead, and it doesn't really matter to you. But like you said, do we have some skin in the game when it comes to the acceptance of what goes on? And are we going to be held accountable for allowing that to be perpetuated? I don't know. Like I said before, I trust that God will mete out justice, and like we had a conversation earlier, we can be entirely wrong on that, but I look at the gospel and see what we have been given, and I'm going to believe that that is right, because I've seen the blessings of it, of following after it in my life. So
Yeah, I agree.
It's really interesting, and I'm interested to see how my views change at the end of the year, having gone through the New Testament. So I need to reach out to them. I have a person who wrote their PhD on the book of Romans. So when that comes out, I kind of want to do I don't want to be cringe and be like another Come Follow Me podcast, but I want to do an episode on that, just because I know this individual is amazing with discussing how the things went on and just kind of like helping point out the way things really are. So
That'd be cool. That'd be very cool.
But my cat is licking my hand raw, so I think he says it's time for me to get off and go play with him for a little bit. It's been a great conversation, KT.
Yeah, definitely.
If we happen to both get canceled, please remember Bennett Phylactery on Twitter and his organization at exo.org. I did have an episode with him, and there's a community of people.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's so silly, but getting canceled is just like having the village come after you, like in the, the 1600s. So
Yep.
you're just getting it's like a human, what's that list you have? Your bucket list. It's like the human bucket list of things. The village comes after you. Check.
Yeah. Yeah. Human experience. One of the rites of passage.
Yeah, dude. I'm going to talk with you offline some other time and see how things are going. And you're more than welcome to come on. I wish you well in your endeavors. And this has been good. I don't know when I'll have this up, but that's that. You have so if people want to reach out and kind of follow you more, where can they get that?
Twitter's really the only place that I have any activity at all, and my handle is at KTMartin25, so it should be easy to find. But yeah, so yeah, I've enjoyed this as well. It's been a good conversation. Talked about a lot of different things, and I appreciate you for having me come on.
Yeah, man, it's been exciting. Listen, and I'll get you the link later.
Okay.
Ciao.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.